Today's story took place in 1981 when I was working at KUZZ in Bakersfield, California. And it's kind of a bizarre story in the fact that how I was involved in it. I can't give you many of the details and the names. Uh, Certainly, I've been how many years I've forgotten, but I did some research and I'm trying to find exactly some of the names and details, but they're not really important at this point because of the way the story ended up, and I wasn't able to find them. So I'll just basically tell you what happened. We got a report from the county sheriff's department that they had arrested a woman who had gathered a bunch of elderly men who were alone, single, almost homeless, in some cases homeless, but still getting their Social Security checks or their disability checks. And she and her, I guess it was her son or her boyfriend, I don't remember now. She brought these people into a home, a 4-bedroom home in Bakersfield. And I believe she was renting the home. And basically, she promised to take care of them, but they had to sign over their monthly checks to her. This is before direct deposit and that type of thing. So you actually got a physical check. And so they would get the checks in the mail at that address, and they would sign them over to her and she'd cash them. And she was making buku bucks because basically she really wasn't taking care of them. They all told us that it was like, I think there was 8 or 9 of them. They all told us that they were kind of left on their own. She didn't do much grocery shopping. She bought bare necessities, medical needs. If there were any major medical needs, they weren't taken care of, unless, obviously if a guy passed out on the floor and had to have an ambulance come, that's a little different story. But she was doing everything she could to stay under the radar and making all this money from their Social Security checks. One guy, old guy, told us, and we didn't know what to believe because these guys were really old and a lot of them were on the verges of dementia. They weren't sure exactly what was going on. One guy told us, "Yeah, man, all she fed us was popcorn for breakfast or for a week, or and this kind of stuff." And they were, if I remember right, they were all black. She was black, and she was just scamming these old black men who were down on their luck. They had nobody. She would go around, see somebody on the street, approach them and promise them the world. And they'd say, yeah, they're getting off the street at the time. And they'd end up in her house, which she lived someplace else. She took care of the house as much as she did. And so the cops finally figured out what it was. And so somebody reported them. And so they arrested her. And all the men were put either in homes or given other support, or they tried to hook them up with family members or whatever it was. But here she was taking advantage of a minority population that was growing, and she was scamming them. So I went out to the scene one day, and this is after, it was taped off and everything. It was still a crime scene. And I went out and I was just walking around the edges, talking to my tape recorder. And there was an old car sitting there. And they weren't giving us any background on this woman, who she was. And I noticed on the car, there was an old bottle of pills, prescription bottle of pills. And it was just sitting on the hood, and I picked it up, and it was old. The pills were inside, were, disintegrating. But I was able to get the information off the pills because it was a bottle of her pills. It wasn't any of the old men. It was a bottle of her pills. And so I took the bottle, took it back, took pictures of it, whatever. And a couple of days later, I returned it to where I found it, and which, that technically, I guess, is illegal, what I did. I probably should have just taken it. I didn't have a camera with me, or I'll say, if I had a camera phone like today, I would have just taken a picture of the bottle and left it there, not even touched it. But no excuses, what I did. I used that information and I started searching newspaper files and making phone calls. And I finally found out a place where she worked, I believe it was in Glendale. And she worked as a nurse at a elder care facility in Glendale, where she learned the ropes of what to do stuff. And I actually got to talk to somebody who knew her, who was in an administrative position, would not go on tape and would not let me use her name. So I had to go on background. So the whole thing was on background, which means basically a source. Deep background would be, someone close to the case, whatever. Anyway, those terms. And so I was able to find out about her. And what happened was, at this care facility, she was fired for theft. She was stealing from patients, and she was stealing from the facility, and she got caught. Well, who knows what else she was doing while she was there that she didn't get caught for, because they didn't make a big deal out of it. They didn't have her arrested. They just fired her. And I couldn't find out much more about her background, but at least I had that. And I created a story out of that, and we aired that without sound. I told the story a couple of mornings later, an exclusive KUZZ news exclusive. This is about this, and I told the story succinctly. Local DA heard it, had more information. He called me, and he had more because of my reporting. I found out stuff that he didn't, and he thanked me for that, and that was okay. I said, I didn't do it for you. I did it for us. And he goes, I understand that, but I appreciate it anyway. And so they used that to some degree, but the case started falling apart. The old men had conflicting stories. That, like I said, some of them had dementia. They weren't reliable in their testimony, and never really found out what happened, but there was no indictment. And as far as I know, I think the only thing that happened, she may have had to pay a fine, and she was off on her own. And I don't think she ever spent a day in jail. But it just shows what can happen in society when fringe people who are on the edge, marginalized people, can happen to those folks if we're not attentive enough, and how scammers are always out there and fraudsters are always out there ready to take advantage of those who don't have the capability to take care of themselves. And kind of gave me a lesson on society. And even though she didn't, really have to pay for her crimes, maybe she was in a position where she didn't do it again, hopefully. And as for me, it was a nice investigative story. Gave me a real good chance to do some investigative work. And that's a gem. That's something for me, I love doing, and have done more of that, but never to this degree of this particular story in this way. Hope you enjoyed the story, and we'll have another one for you next time.